I heard my daughter-in-law say, "Why is she even still alive?" while I stood 5 feet away, holding a warm peach cobbler. Not whispered, not muttered, just spoken, casually, like asking someone to pass the salt. She was on the other side of the wooden fence talking to someone I didn't recognize. A woman in a pale linen dress holding a plastic cup of sangria. They laughed. Brittany's laugh wasn't loud, but it was sharp, the kind that splits a person somewhere they didn't know was soft. I didn't move. My hands didn't tremble. The cobbler was still warm in my arms, wrapped in a towel with yellow daisies, a towel I'd had since Kevin was 12. That day, I brought the cobbler because it was Sierra's favorite. Or at least it used to be. I stood behind that fence for 4 more seconds, counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I pushed open the gate and I walked in. No one turned to look. There were maybe 20 people in the yard, folding tables draped in burlap runners, paper lanterns strung from the trees like they were preparing for a magazine shoot. Brittany always liked making things look more perfect than they were. I passed the drink table. A man I didn't know poured vodka into a red cup and laughed like he lived there. I walked by Kevin, my son, who didn't notice me. He was tossing bean bags with someone half his age yelling "cornhole champ" like it mattered. No one greeted me. Until, Elaine, we didn't know you were coming. That voice. Brittany, again. Not surprised, irritated. Like someone discovering their food delivery had the wrong dipping sauce. I looked at her and said quietly, "I brought the cobbler." She didn't reach for it. Just looked past me, then offered a tight-lipped smile. "You can put it on the dessert table. Over there, behind the cooler." That's when I realized there was no seat for me. No place setting, no glass, no space. Just an afterthought walking in through a side gate. But I didn't leave. I walked over to the plastic table near the grill, placed the cobbler down like it wasn't still warm from my oven, like it hadn't been made by someone who used to be the first person they called when Sierra was sick or when they needed rent money. I found an empty chair behind a planter and sat down, alone. No one looked. I could have been a neighbor. I could have been invisible. And maybe to them I was both. I sat still for nearly 20 minutes. No one brought me a plate. No one offered me a drink. The sun slipped behind the neighbor's roof, but no one asked if I was cold. Kevin eventually raised a bottle of beer and shouted, "To family." Everyone clinked their drinks. There were cheers, laughter, but no one looked in my direction. Sierra, my granddaughter, ran past me twice, once chasing a boy, once looking for her phone. Her hair was longer now. She didn't look my way, didn't say hi, not even a blink of recognition. Once she would have crawled into my lap, sticky hands, and all asking for gum or a story about the turtle I rescued when I was little. That girl. She wasn't here anymore. Eventually, someone began collecting plates. Not me. Not yet. I stayed seated, watching Brittany glide between groups of people, like she was hosting a gala, not a backyard BBQ. She laughed easily. Not once did she look at the cobbler. Later, as the food disappeared and the playlist turned louder, I stood. My back ached. My knees whispered complaints. But I moved. I cleared plates, folded napkins, wiped down sticky tables with a damp paper towel I'd brought from the kitchen out of habit. I'd been wiping up after these people for decades. No one thanked me. As Brittany disappeared inside, I gathered my empty glass dish, still faintly warm from the sun. I cradled it like something sacred, Kevin was talking to someone near the fire pit. He saw me just briefly, then looked away. That flicker of eye contact told me everything. He'd heard what Brittany said. He hadn't said a word about it. I walked down the side path toward the gate, the gravel crunching beneath my feet like a private audience. My reflection flashed briefly in the window of their kitchen. I looked older than I felt. Tired, but steady. I didn't leave in anger, not in heartbreak either. I left with a decision. The next morning, I made coffee in my smallest pot. 1 cup. No more pretending. I sat by the window, the same window Kevin once sat beside, swinging his legs and spelling dinosaur wrong on his 3rd grade worksheet. I used to correct him gently with so much hope in my voice. Now, I said nothing. The cobbler dish was washed and dried by noon. I put it away. Then I opened the file cabinet in the hallway. It creaked, it always did, and I pulled out the file labeled Kevin House. Inside the purchase contract, the deed, the letter I'd written 5 years ago. This $40,000 is a gift. No repayment expected. I love you. Always. I read the line twice. It burned. Then I closed the file. At 4:17 p.m., I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Lena Ramos. We taught at the same high school for almost 2 decades. After she retired, she went into estate law. A second act, she called it. She picked up on the second ring. Elaine. Her voice hadn't changed. I need your help, I said. With clarity. She didn't ask why. She just said, come by tomorrow. Bring everything. That night I didn't take a sleeping pill. Didn't cry. Didn't pace. Not peace exactly, but a kind of alignment. Like bones clicking into place after being out for too long. Lena Ramos opened the front door, wearing a blue cardigan that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and peppermint tea, the exact scent of quiet competence. She hadn't changed much since our days at Sonoma High. Back then, I taught English. She taught U.S. government and knew the tax code better than the principal. When her husband died, she went to night school and became an estate lawyer. Said she got tired of watching people get erased just because they didn't know where to sign their name. Now she lived in a small stucco house just off Cherry Street. Lavender bushes lined the walkway. Wind chimes whispered above the doorframe. Come in, Elaine, she said without asking why I'd called. I stepped inside, clutching the folder to my chest. Yellow manila corners worn labeled in fading marker Kevin House. We sat at her dining table, a solid oak thing that looked like it had opinions. She poured tea chamomile, no sugar. I placed the folder between us like a confession. I need to understand what I gave away, I said. Lena opened it with the careful hands of someone who'd seen too many people regret what they once signed in hope. She didn't speak for a few moments, just scanned the documents. The deed, the bank transfers, the letter I'd written 5 years ago when Kevin and Brittany said they needed a little help just until things stabilized. A gift. No repayment expected. Lena's eyebrows lifted slightly. Then she gave a small grunt, not judgment, just confirmation. You gifted the down payment. There's no joint title, no lien, no repayment clause. It's all theirs now. She looked up. I'm sorry. I nodded. I already knew that. But it still stung the way truth always does when you finally let it be spoken aloud. But she added and tapped the table with a short fingernail. Just because you can't get the house back doesn't mean you're powerless. I looked at her. Go on. You can change everything else. Your will. your power of attorney, beneficiaries, account access. All of it. Her voice was calm, factual. But to me, it sounded like a door creaking open in a house I thought I'd been locked out of. You don't need their permission to reclaim yourself, she said. I sat back in the chair, letting that sentence land. She reached for a notepad and scribbled a short checklist. Revoke existing powers of attorney. Remove authorized users from financial accounts. Redraft will and healthcare proxy. Establish new trust if desired. She slid it toward me. I folded it in half and tucked it into my purse. My hands were steady. For once, not from trying to seem fine, but because I finally was becoming so. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. The same table where Kevin used to sit with a bowl of cereal feet, not yet touching the floor. The same table where I taught him how to write his name in cursive. Where I read to Sierra from the Velveteen Rabbit, while she drank warm milk in mismatched pajamas. I wrote a name at the top of the page, Kevin. Then, with one clean stroke of my pen, I drew a line straight through it. Not with hate, not even with sadness, with clarity. The next morning I woke up before the sun rose. The house was silent, but I wasn't. I made coffee in my smallest pot again. 1 cup. No cream, no distractions. Then I pulled out my purse and unfolded Lena's checklist. 4 items. 4 boundaries I should have drawn years ago. I started with the locks. The locksmith's name was Brendan. Young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and shoes that squeaked on my linoleum floor. He didn't ask why I was changing both the front and back doors. Just did his work efficiently, professionally. When he handed me the new keys, I made 4 copies. 1 stayed on my key ring, 1 went in the fireproof box, 1 I tucked into an envelope for my neighbor Connie, and 1 I kept in my purse, always within reach, next the bank. The branch was nearly empty when I arrived. Mid-morning on a weekday, the best time to make clean breaks. A woman named Sasha greeted me. Her blazer was too big and her voice had that polite retail edge. But when I explained what I needed, remove all authorized users from all personal and joint accounts, reissue access, reset all security, her expression changed. She didn't ask what happened. Just got to work. You had 1 cosigner, she said, typing. Kevin Portwood. I nodded once. Remove him. She paused, fingers hovering. Just to confirm. Remove all access. Erase him, I said softly. She nodded and clicked. Just like that. Gone. She handed me the updated cards, printed out new documents, and gave me a small folder labeled Primary Owner. It felt absurd how easy it was, how little resistance there was to reclaim something I had once handed over with shaking trust. I left the bank and didn't cry. Instead, I walked to the little bakery across the street and bought myself a lemon bar. No occasion, no reason. Because for the first time in years, I'd done something entirely for myself. When I returned home, I stood in front of the hallway drawer, the one filled with little notebooks, stickers, toy erasers, bits, and baubles I'd bought for Sierra just in case. I used to keep it stocked like a hotel minibar. Tiny comforts for a child who had long stopped coming. I took every item out and placed them one by one into a brown paper bag. Then I carried it to the curb and placed it next to the recycling bin. I watched it sit there for hours. No one came to claim it. No one asked what had changed, That night, I opened my address book. It was older than Sierra tabs, worn corners, bent ink, fading. I flipped to P. Found Kevin Portwood, Brittany Sierra. The whole page. One by one, I took a black pen and drew a line through each name. Then I turned to R and wrote a new one, Lena Ramos, Attorney, Trust and Estate. And below that, in small, steady print, Connie McKee, neighbor, keeps a spare key. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. Later, as I drank my tea by the window, I looked around the house, the kitchen I once filled with casseroles and cupcakes, the living room where Sierra used to build blanket forts. Everything still looked the same. But everything was different. Because now, for the first time in a long time, I was the one holding the pen. The office of Charles Duval smelled like cedarwood and legal paper. There were no motivational posters, just a clock that didn't tick and a glass jar of black licorice no one ever touched. He looked like someone who'd been born wearing cufflinks, precise, soft-spoken, and patient in the way only a second marriage lawyer or a chess teacher could be. I liked him immediately. We sat across from each other, a neat mahogany desk between us. I placed the folder Lena had helped me prepare on top of it. I want to create a living trust, I said. The house goes into it. I stay the trustee. When I die, I want it sold. Every cent goes to Harbor Grace Shelter. He raised an eyebrow. All of it. All of it. He didn't ask why, just nodded and started typing. It felt oddly satisfying, like erasing a chalkboard after years of writing the same sentence over and over. Give more. Give again. Give still. Now I was writing something else. In ink. We worked in silence for a while. He explained contingencies. I asked questions about tax implications. He offered a few phrases for clarity, sole authority. No inheritance. No familial override. When we got to the section about beneficiaries, he paused. Anyone in your family you'd like to include elsewhere? Bank accounts, policies, healthcare decisions. I looked at my hands folded in my lap. Then I said, no. Remove Kevin from everything. Entirely. He hesitated, not out of judgment, but because most people his age still expected some apology to be owed between generations. He has a house, a career, a wife, I said. He's made it clear what matters to him. It isn't me, Charles wrote quietly. The keys clicked like distant rain. By the end of the hour, I'd signed 12 documents, initialed 14 places, and been handed a slim binder with embossed letters, Elaine Portwood Living Trust. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, binder to the left, cup of tea to the right. There was a knock at the door, 2 light taps, then a pause. I didn't expect anyone. When I opened it, Sierra was standing there in a hoodie, 2 sizes too big, her hair in a loose braid, her hands buried in her sleeves. Her eyes were red. Not swollen, but recent. Is this still your number? She asked, holding up her phone. I found it in Dad's old iPad. I nodded once. It is. She swallowed. I wanted to say I'm sorry. She didn't rush to explain, didn't blurt, just stood there breathing shallow and fast like it took everything in her to walk across the street. I opened the door wider. Come in, just you. She stepped inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had been a battlefield of board games, homework, and birthday candles for over 30 years. I poured her a cup of tea. Mint. She didn't ask for sugar. I didn't offer. She stared into the steam like it might give her better words. I heard what Mom said, she said finally. In the backyard. That day, I nodded. So did I. I laughed, she whispered. I don't even know why. It wasn't funny. No, I said gently. It wasn't. She looked up and her eyes were trembling, but her voice stayed even. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything to you. I walked right past you at the library and the grocery store, like you weren't real. I let the silence hold. I'd spent a lifetime filling in people's discomfort with warmth they hadn't earned. Not today. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know how to fix it, so I just didn't. I studied her. She still had Kevin's eyes that deep-set brown, but none of his distance. Not tonight. You were learning by example, I said. That's not your fault. But what you choose next, that is. She nodded slowly. I want to come back, she said, if that's allowed. I sat with the weight of that sentence. Sierra, I said, you can come back, but not for cobbler, not for holidays or quiet guilt, only for truth, only for presence. She blinked fast. I can do that. We didn't talk about Kevin, or Brittany, or what came next. Instead, we talked about her history teacher, who called everyone young people, and about the girl in her chemistry class who kept a pet snake in her locker for 2 days before anyone noticed. She laughed at her own stories like they surprised her. I brought out a small slice of banana bread, not from the freezer fresh. We each took a piece, ate it slowly like it meant something. Before she left, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her sleeve. It's just a sketch, she said quickly. I don't know if it's good. You don't have to keep it. She slid it across the table. I opened it carefully. It was a pencil drawing rough, a little smudged, but unmistakable. A woman seated at a table, her back straight, her hands poised. In front of her, a chessboard. On her side, only 2 pieces, a queen and a pawn. On the other side, a full set. But the queen and the pawn were in winning positions. She's not done, Sierra said softly. She's just starting to play her game. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Can I see you again? She asked. Maybe Thursday I can bring cookies. I nodded. Only if they're warm. She grinned and hugged me quick but tight, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. After she left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the sketch still open in front of me. The silence no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like a room that had just been cleaned. A place ready to be filled, but only with what mattered. 3 days after Sierra's visit, I began packing. Not in a rush, not in grief, but with purpose. It started with the guest room, the one no guest had used in over a year. The closet still held a dress I'd lent Brittany for a wedding back in 2014. She never returned it, just hung it back, still smelling faintly of a perfume I never liked. I folded it carefully and dropped it into the donation box. Not bitterly, just finally. The dresser was older than Kevin. I'd bought it from a thrift store when I was 7 months pregnant. Refinished it by hand in the garage with my late husband Harold, who sanded the corners and said, "This one's gonna last." And it had. Through moves and spills and tantrums and teenage years. But it wouldn't come with me. The drawers were empty now, and somehow, so was the weight I'd carried about it. I taped a note to the top, "Leave for new owner, solid piece." Good history. In the hallway, I paused by a cross stitch, hanging slightly crooked. "Peace lives here," it read. Made by my sister Ruth in 1987. The thread had faded, but the message hadn't. I took it down and wrapped it in brown paper. That one would come with me. Kevin's old room was next. The curtains were still the navy blue ones with little white sailboats, his favorite ones. I'd meant to replace them, but like so many things, they stayed out of inertia. The bookshelf still held a box labeled private in uneven third-grade handwriting. I didn't open it. I'd opened enough. Instead, I sat on the edge of his childhood bed and looked out at the backyard, the crooked apple tree still standing in the corner. The one Kevin had fallen out of when he was 8. He'd cried so hard I thought his arm was broken. It wasn't. I had carried him back inside, barefoot, furious, and relieved. He clung to me like he might never let go. That boy I missed. The man I was learning to release. After a while, I rose and wrote in my notebook, "Leave the curtains. Take the quilt." I moved to the kitchen next. Opened the cabinet above the stove, my baking cabinet. Vanilla, cinnamon, brown sugar. The measuring cups Harold gave me for our 10th anniversary. The rolling pin with the worn handles. I packed each item gently, like saying goodbye to a version of myself I still loved, just no longer needed to perform. The house was quiet as I moved, but it wasn't empty. It was listening. The final room was the living room. It had once held chaos birthday balloons, puzzles half done. Harold's favorite recliner, Kevin's scattered Legos, Sierra's sticky fingers on the glass coffee table. Now it held order, but the kind of order that felt like forgetting. I took down the family photo wall slowly, frame by frame. There were smiles frozen in time. Graduation gowns, first steps, Christmas sweaters I hated but wore anyway. I didn't throw them away. But I didn't pack them either. I wrapped them in soft towels and placed them in a box marked, "History do not open yet." I left one photo out. Me and Harold on the front porch, holding paintbrushes like trophies, covered in splatters, laughing into the sun. That one I wrapped carefully in a kitchen towel and placed into a small box labeled Essentials. By Tuesday, the house was nearly empty. The movers would come in 4 days. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and a mug of chamomile. I watched the street, quiet, familiar. A porch light flickered across the road. Wind brushed against the mailbox. My old wind chimes murmured in the breeze. No one came. And for once, I didn't expect them to. I wasn't waiting anymore. The next morning, I called Eagle Glen Senior Residences. Teresa, the leasing manager, answered with that always kind voice of hers. "Yes, Miss Portwood. Unit 1B is still available. Ground floor, bright windows. Move in on the first yes," I said. That afternoon, I drove across town with a clipboard and a new pen. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean, honest, quiet. Teresa walked me through a small balcony, south-facing, a kitchen with 4 burners, a built-in bookshelf I hadn't asked for but appreciated. She handed me the keys and said, "You're going to be happy here." "I already am," I replied. When I got back home, I opened a fresh page in my journal and wrote, "Today I didn't downsize. I chose the size of life that fits me now." That night, I placed Sierra's drawing, the chessboard sketch, into a new frame I'd bought at the thrift store for $2. I hung it near the window where the morning light would hit it first. A queen and a pawn. 2 pieces. Still enough to win if you play them right. The first thing I unpacked in the new apartment was the kettle. The second was Sierra's drawing. I placed the kettle on the stove, the drawing by the window. The light in Unit 1B was gentler somehow, not bright, but present, like it wasn't trying to prove anything. That Sunday, I hosted tea for the first time in over a decade. Not for a holiday, Not because I was expected to, just because I wanted to sit across a table from women who knew how to listen. Connie McKee came first, holding her crossword book like a guest offering flowers. She wore her usual pink cardigan with too many tissues in the pocket. Then came Ida in her fur-lined coat, even though it was 68 degrees and sunny. And finally, Nora, an old friend from the church choir with her slight perfume of lilac and old paperbacks. I hadn't set the table with my best china. Just my blue teacups, the chipped ones that had survived 2 moves and 1 earthquake. There were no candles, no centerpiece. Just banana bread sliced unevenly and butter on a saucer. We didn't talk about Kevin or Brittany or Sierra. We talked about knees and grocery prices, about a bus driver who waited for Connie even though she dropped all her change, about Ida's niece who just got engaged to a boy who wears socks with cartoon whales, about the hummingbird feeder outside my balcony and how quickly the birds had found it. The room dipped into silence, the way rooms full of older women sometimes do, not awkward, just full. And I said it. I moved, I told them, out of the house. For good. 3 pairs of eyebrows rose not out of shock, but recognition. "Does your son know?" Nora asked softly. "He doesn't need to," I said. They didn't push, just nodded. Marcia reached over and took another slice of bread. "Well then," she said, "you're one of us now." They stayed until just after 3, helped wash the cups, wrapped the remaining slice in foil, promised they'd come again next week. When they left, the apartment was quiet. But it didn't feel empty. It felt rightful. I walked through each room slowly. Not to say goodbye like I had with the house, but to say, "You're mine now." In the hallway, I stopped at the coat hook where I'd hung my scarf, the one Harold had given me the year before he passed. Soft blue, faded at the edges, still warm. I wrapped it around my shoulders, sat by the window, and wrote 1 line in my journal. 3 women drank tea in my kitchen today. No one interrupted. No one corrected. We just existed. 2 mornings later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Kevin's. Still angular, like he was trying too hard to look sure of himself. I opened it slowly. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if you want me to. I let things happen. I didn't speak when I should have. I laughed when I shouldn't have. I didn't ask what you needed because I didn't want the answer. I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but Sierra says you're different now. Braver, quieter, but in a way that fills a room. She said you're not angry, just finished. I hope someday you'll let me try again. Love, Kevin." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer marked Correspondence Personal. Not forgiveness, not rejection. Just a place for it to rest. That afternoon, Sierra arrived with tulips in her arms, red still wrapped in paper, from the florist. "You don't like birthday cake," she said. "So I brought flowers, like grown-ups do." She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card she'd made herself. Painted, not drawn. On the front, 2 chairs on a porch, 1 empty, 1 with a teacup on the armrest. Inside it read, "Thanks for keeping a seat for me." I didn't speak right away, just placed my hand on hers and nodded. She didn't look away. We drank tea and talked about her summer plans. She wanted to volunteer at Harbor Grace, said she'd put my name down on the application. If that's okay, I told her. Only if you use it for something true. She grinned. That's the only way I use it now. Before she left, she looked at me the way people look at monuments, not with worship, but with understanding. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. You look like someone who doesn't flinch. After she was gone, I stood at the window and watched the sun fade behind the trees. The quiet in the apartment wasn't hollow. It was full. Full of things that hadn't arrived yet, but would only if I kept the door open just wide enough. The next day, I mailed a check to Harbor Grace. Not in my will now. While I could, I walked in and handed it to the director and simply said, "This is for the women who leave without shoes." She cried. I didn't. I'd done my crying already. That evening I made soup. No guests. No occasion. Just butter leaks and the quiet sizzle of something softening. I ate at the counter in my robe standing. At 8:45 the buzzer rang. Sierra. She was holding a shoebox and a grin. "Stuff I'm not ready to keep at home," she said. Inside a notebook, a photo of us from the zoo, when she was 5, a necklace Brittany never liked. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, and asked, "Do you think people change?" I thought for a moment. Then said, "Sometimes. But more often they stop pretending." She nodded. "Am I allowed to not pretend here?" "Only here," I said. Before she left, she hugged me like she meant it. Later that week, the house sold. I didn't go back. Charles handled the closing. The buyer was a retired couple. No children. They wanted history and a quiet neighborhood. They'd found both. I stood in my apartment that night, lit a small candle, and wrote in my journal. They asked why I was still alive. Now I can answer. To remember my name. To set my own table. To keep the door open just wide enough for those who knock with clean hands. Some doors don't need to be slammed. Just gently locked from the inside, with a window left cracked for the ones who knock with care. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment to remind others they're not walking alone. Subscribe to Eleanor Speaks for more quiet stories that refuse to be forgotten.